What's happening? What's happening, good people? It's your man Cam. Just jumping back on here. Just want to start off with a little light note, so to speak. You know, nothing too serious right now. But I was just thinking to myself, you know, and everybody don't have vehicles or what have you, but if jobs like Uber Eats and Instacart was around when I was younger and driving, you know how much easier it would have been to be able to get the things that I wanted, not necessarily needed. My point being is, we used to sit back and try to scruff up $2.50 a piece to go half on a bag. You know what I'm saying? Or scruff up $2 or $3 to put gas in the car. Now you can sign up for Uber Eats or Instacart, make $20, put gas in your car, and go buy you something to eat or what have you, you know. But like I said, that's just on a lighter note. But I want to get back on the serious tip like I normally am, in which, if you already know me, you know what this involves. And it's this president in this White House, man, and that robot that he got on the side of him, basically telling him what he needs to do and how he needs to do it. You understand? But long story short, wait a minute, let me make sure I go the right direction. But yeah, long story short, Trump had a meeting recently with the president of France. And in this meeting, Trump outright lied on the dude and on France, saying that France loaned the money and guns and artillery or whatever they gave over to Ukraine to help support them in this war that's going on over there. Trump said that it was a loan. And the president of France basically had to stop this guy in his tracks and put his hand on his arm and say, hold up, man. Hold up. That wasn't a loan that we had given to Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't owe us anything for what we've done for them. And then he went along further to say, well, if Russia wants to reimburse the country of France for all of the destruction and problems it has caused, then we'll consider a loan at that point, but it would be a loan to Russia. And just like this president and his boldness and his arrogance, and because his head is bigger than the moon itself, turned around and said, well, if y'all want to believe that, then go ahead. But that was a loan that France had given to Ukraine. And he said this immediately after the guy corrected him and told him, no, that wasn't a loan. But once again, that just goes to show you how bold of a character this so-called president is. And I say so-called because, yeah, he's the president of the United States, but he ain't my president, whether I live in this country or not. And then as well, he went further along and had a conference or what have you. So the media asked him, well, what are you doing about the tariffs with Mexico and Canada? And he said, yeah, he's moving along with the tariffs. The tariffs are going to happen. And then he went further along to say, well, I stay up late at night and I read over these agreements, and I just can't see why somebody would sign something like this. And so I say that because when he was in office for the first term, and I want y'all to go back and Google this and see it for yourselves, see the meeting he had with the French president this go round, and then Google this guy's first term in office when he signed the trade agreement which is the current trade agreement, the one that he said he don't see why anybody on earth would sign this agreement. And he signed the agreement with the Mexican president at the time, as well as with the Canadian prime minister or president, or whatever you call the Canadian leader. He signed the darn thing and said that this is the greatest thing ever, like he always says. Everything that he says out of his mouth, it could be a pile of cow poop, and he'll say this is the greatest thing ever. And these idiotic, blind people that believe and hang on to everything that he says runs with it. But yeah, and like I said, he said in that when he signed that trade agreement in his first term, that this is the greatest thing ever, and yada yada yada, but you got to go back for yourselves. Like I say, Google it and look at it, and also look at this recent past meeting that he had, saying that whoever signed this agreement must have been out of their minds, in other words. And he the one that signed it. But once again, this is who majority of the people of this country wanted to be in office, whether white, black, Hispanic, or whatever have you. All races voted this guy in. And all of the races that voted him in are some uneducated, blind, manipulated minded people. And I say that because I want you guys to read 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 3. That's 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 3. And in that Bible verse, it says outrightly what I've been saying all this time, that the men and women of this current culture that we're in only wants to hear things that arouses their imagination. They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear something that's going to reprimand them or make them stay in line. They want something that's going to make them feel like they're floating on cloud 29 and floating on and walking on water. That's what they want to hear. But read that verse and it'll explain to you guys exactly what's going on. And also read Zephaniah. In that Bible chapter, Zephaniah, or that book I should say, that book of Zephaniah, there's a part of it, and you have to read all of it to get the full understanding, but it's a mentioning of Gaza in that book, and that God eventually is going to remove all of the people that don't belong there and give that land over to the ones that he wants to inherit that land. And it's going to be a beautiful place. And this is God, not Trump. Because we've seen where Trump has basically put himself in a position of God, thinking that he can fix and change everything, saying how all the people that's there needs to be moved out. And he'll basically turn it into a resort country. But this isn't a resort that our God, or that my God, or that the God of this earth is talking about. It's not going to be a resort where people's going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go and visit Gaza, to live in some big hotel, to gamble at somebody's casino, and to swim in the big swimming pool. This is a promised land that God has for a certain group of people. There's a big difference. But like I say, we have a false prophet and an antichrist in the White House right now. And literally, they're saying things that are apart from what God says and wants to be done, but they're saying it on a plane that sounds similar to what God is saying he wants to have happen and wants to have done. if you get my drift. But that's what the false prophet and that's what Antichrist do. They say things to make themselves appear like they are the Christ or that they are God, in which anybody with any common sense knows that's not the case. With the type of language that comes out, not saying that God doesn't get angered, but besides all of that, we have a false prophet and an Antichrist in the White House right now. And that's the Tesla guy, and that's this so-called leader that's sitting there right now. And it's, take my word for it, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse as we move along in these 4 years that this guy has in office. And he, like I mentioned before, got rid of top military personnel. He's also gotten rid of top FBI personnel to the point where he can put into those positions the yes men and the yes women that will do what he says, when he says it, and how he says he wants it to be done, so that he can extend his control over this country. And once you get the military and FBI under your grasp, it's not too much more you need, because he already has the uneducated people. And we all know that most people that are uneducated are in the criminal system, are the ones that are out here doing some of the most foul things in society, are normally the uneducated. Come on. And he's once again put a guy in there, and this guy's name is Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino. Look him up. He's got podcasts and everything. Dan Bongino. This guy is one of the most far-right MAGA hat-wearing people that you would ever want to hear or see. And that's why he got the second highest position in the FBI and has no FBI experience. And I'm not saying that you have to have experience to be able to do a job well, but certain jobs, I would rather have someone with experience doing it. Just like working on my car, I want somebody that has experience in the know-how. If you're going to be putting a roof on my house, if you're going to be working on the electrical components in my house, I want somebody that's experienced and they know the ins and outs of how to do things. But this is not the way of thinking by this president. Like I said, look him up. He said that the uprising that occurred was all made up and it wasn't real, and just all kinds of nonsense, in which anybody with any common sense sitting in front of a television or that was in DC at the time knows that this was not something that was made up. Especially when you got when you see the characters that are being locked up behind this situation. Proud Boys and all this other nonsense, but yet it was made up. Come on, y'all. Come on. But man, it's going to be a long journey. We're going to have to stay strong, and we're going to have to stay vigilant, and we're going to have to become more aware of God's word, because we have two of the most manipulative, controlling, power-hungry people in the White House that we've ever seen in this country. But just be prepared, y'all. And there's so much more I could say, but I'm going to jump off of here, and I'll talk to y'all soon.